Welcome to everyone who has joined so far. Just a reminder that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode and your video is turned off. We'll get started with today's presentation in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, please join us in watching this short video about domesticshelters.org.
There are over 10 million online searches each month for information regarding domestic violence in just the US and Canada. Anyone, regardless of gender, sexuality, race, or religion, can experience abuse. Domestic abuse isn't always physical violence. It can be emotional, verbal, even financial. It can feel isolating and hopeless. For victims, it often takes several attempts to escape an abusive partner. There are many reasons victims are often afraid to reach out for help, including embarrassment or denial, being isolated from family and friends, or fear of losing their children. But if you're experiencing abuse, you're not alone. It's not your fault. Help is here for you. domesticshelters.org is the leading domestic violence online resource where abuse victims and survivors can find everything they need to take steps towards safety, all in one place. With domesticshelters.org's searchable database of domestic violence programs and shelters in the US and Canada, anyone can find a nearby trained advocate who cares, along with support and resources. Victims of abuse may not be ready to connect with an advocate yet, but with domesticshelters.org's comprehensive library of relevant and high-quality content, it's simple to find information that can help change lives for the better. Domestic violence professionals and advocates rely on domesticshelters.org for ways to better support their local communities through free online expert-led training, awarded tools, and other powerful resources. The profound impact of domestic violence hurts everyone. Victims lose hope. Children suffer lifelong trauma. Communities are permanently damaged. That's why millions of people come to domesticshelters.org to get the answers and help that they need. And why 8 out of 10 domesticshelters.org visitors share their newfound knowledge with others, exponentially increasing public awareness of abuse. Your support helps connect those millions of victims and survivors of domestic violence with the resources they need to identify, escape, and heal from abuse. If you aren't sure where to turn, we're here to help you feel safe again, wherever you are on your journey. Please visit us at domesticshelters.org.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Ashley Rumschlag, and I am the CEO and president of domesticshelters.org and Teresa's Fund. I'm joined today by Rachel Myers, our Senior Digital Service Specialist, and Hannah Craig, our Vice President of Content, who will be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. We are so excited today to hear from Adam Dodge of EndTAB, and we're going to get started with the presentation shortly. We're just going to have run through a quick few housekeeping items about how to use Zoom and things of that nature. So we are using live closed captions right now. If you would like to turn those on, please click more in the menu and select show subtitles. We will also provide a transcript within a week of the presentation. Again, you are in a listen-only mode, so your microphone and your camera are turned off. Please be sure to ask questions in the Q&A box. And the chat can be used to communicate with other attendees. And here's a list of things that will be sent to you within a week of the presentation. We have a certificate of attendance, transcript, and the recording of today's webinar, as well as a list of any additional resources mentioned throughout the presentation. And just your friendly reminder that in 6 days, the nomination period for the Purple Ribbon Awards is closing. So we will not be extending it this year. And last year, we were kind enough to add an extra week on there, but we do have a hard deadline to keep things on schedule for this year. So everything needs to be in and submitted by the end of the day on February 28th. So if you have been considering nominating someone on your team or someone in your community or nominating yourself for something amazing that you did this last year, please do that. We do welcome nominations from anywhere in the world. So of course, most of the people joining here today are from the US and Canada. So we look forward to hearing about the amazing work that's being done. It's such a wonderful time and opportunity to celebrate all the work that's being done. And of course, it doesn't hurt that you're eligible for up to $30,000 in grants. So if you haven't already, please do go over to purpleribbanawards.org, or you can find that information at domesticshelters.org, where you can fill out the form. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out an application. You can attach any different, supporting information you'd like as well. So again, 6 days left to do that. So once we wrap up on this presentation, I hope everyone will head over and submit a nomination. And there's that information. If you have questions for us, just info@domesticshelters.org. A reminder to our call-in listeners, so everyone who is just on their phone, so not logged in on a computer, but maybe just called in on their device today, just send us a quick note. That way we can add you to the email list as an attendee. All right, and we are so thankful to have a sponsor for today's event, Cap60. So Cap60 is the #1 software solution for victim services agencies. Using their fully encrypted system, you can easily input and access each client's sensitive information. When it comes to reporting, seamlessly export all client demographics, services, unduplicated client counts, and other key metrics to satisfy funder requirements. Some of the additional perks of Cap60 solution include victim and offender tracking, a centralized intake process, shelter and transitional housing automation, outreach and volunteer management, hotline call tracking, counseling and legal silos, and all funder reports, including VAWA, VOCA, FIPSPA, and the CAPA report. Stick around after the webinar if you'd like to see a demonstration of their software and learn more. All right. Well, once again, we are so excited to have Adam join us today. You might remember Adam joined us back at the end of last year for a panel discussion on technology abuse. Following the event, we received a lot of feedback asking for more actionable and specific resources and ideas for how to help people experiencing technology abuse. So we invited Adam to come back and do just that. So welcome, Adam. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm so excited to be here. I'm just transfixed on everybody saying hello in the chat. And I see some organizations that I recognize and have worked with before. So it's just a very cool thing to see everybody coming together on a subject that I'm really passionate about and excited to talk with you all about. So let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Awesome. Oh, and I'm going to ring a bell. We just hit the 1,000 mark. So we have exactly 1,000 people on this webinar right now. So obviously really kind of highlighting the importance of this topic. And so we're just so grateful to have you share your expertise. So I'm going to go offline and I'll be pop to ask questions as they come up.
Fabulous. Fabulous. This is so cool. Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Dodge. As was mentioned, I am the founder of EndTAB, and I am here to talk to you about domestic violence and really tech-facilitated domestic violence and how anybody can do a really impactful job of centering the digital safety of the victims that they serve in the same way we center their physical safety, because they're equally as important. It's just that, well, as I'm going to talk about, we haven't really been trained and resourced to properly address the tech facilitated side of things or the digital safety side of things. And as a result, that moved very quickly and sort of outpaced the way we were being trained to prevent and address domestic violence in our communities. And we need to play a little bit of catch up. But as I'm going to talk about, the good news is you do not have to be a tech expert to do this work. In fact, I am not a tech expert. So a couple things, just housekeeping items here. I put out a newsletter, and I will put this in the chat as well, though it may get buried very quickly in the chat because there's a lot of folks posting here. But let me just put this. I'm going to add it here in the chat. I've got so you can join our newsletter. It's something that I send out weekly with tips and guidance on how to address and prevent tech facilitated abuse in our communities. Usually I'm talking about new things that need to be on our radar, like new online dating safety features or personal trackers, which I'm going to talk about today, or really anything that it's going to impact our work so that we have a heads up, as opposed to getting blindsided when victims and survivors that with whom we work start bringing this up, and it's something we've never seen before. I try to be sort of sound the alarm or the early warning bell. So feel free to use your phone and scan the QR code with your camera, and you can join there. I also put it in the chat, as I mentioned, and I'm going to talk about this at the end, but we are offering a free webinar, which I included a link to in the chat, and we'll provide a QR code at the end of today's presentation. We're going to be providing, it's going to be on serving deaf domestic violence survivors in the digital age. So how those folks really deaf survivors really rely on technology more heavily to survive and thrive today, and when that technology gets weaponized against them to cause harm by a current or former intimate partner, we need to be able to guide those victims and survivors on how to stay safe. And so there's some really great opportunities there. I'm collaborating with 3 amazing experts that work in the domestic violence deaf survivor community we're going to be collaborating on that. So hope you can join that as well. So my background, look, going to keep it very brief here. I'm a California-based attorney, but really identify as a domestic violence advocate. I worked for a domestic violence shelter and community organization for 9 years and created EndTAB out of a sense of frustration where I was seeing tech-facilitated abuse coming up in really every case in some way, shape, or form. And I did not feel confident in my ability to prevent and address it, and neither did any of my colleagues at my organization. And when I sought out training for non-tech experts who work with victims of gender-based violence, it just didn't exist. So I set about creating what I needed in that moment and started EndTAB 3.5 years ago. Really, our main goal is to train and resource victim-serving professionals to address and prevent tech-facilitated abuse. We also do community presentations, and I speak at conferences, and I work with law enforcement and train judges and the military and all sorts of folks. But when I started this thing, it was to address tech-facilitated domestic violence, which is why I'm so excited to be here, because you are my people. I have worked on hotlines. I have worked as a case manager. I've worked as a legal advocate. I've worked in prevention and outreach education. So I've done all those things. And so, what I'm going to be talking about today is not going to be techie. I'm not going to use any acronyms. I'm not going to be, because I don't come from the tech world. I come from our world, right? I just come to the intersection of tech and abuse from that direction. My pronouns are he, him. Content warning. Do you all really need a content warning? I do it anyway. I am going to be talking about tech-facilitated abuse to the extent that makes anybody uncomfortable or is traumatizing or activating or re-traumatizing any way, shape, or form. I really want this to be a safe space and one in which we prioritize our own health, safety, and well-being first. So if you need to mute the presentation, step away, message us, whatever it is that you need to do for you, I am here for it. I support it, and I hope you feel empowered to do that. Questions. So go ahead and put questions in the Q&A, please, because if you put them in the chat, they're going to get pushed down very quickly, right? And so, and I'm going to be taking breaks to answer those questions. So I would love to hear from you, even if it's not about necessarily, if it's something that's coming in your work and I'm not talking about it, let's talk about it. I want this to be relevant to you all as well. And then I'm going to be sharing my contact information at the end, but if I can be a resource to you all in the future, just let me know. All right, let's get started. And I just should say, goals today, I'm going to be highlighting some familiar and emerging forms of tech-facilitated domestic violence so we know what we're looking at. And then I'm going to talk about really relatable ways that we can address it, right? So one part knowledge building, one part skill building. I hate going to a training or a presentation where I get a bunch of information, but I don't get any skills or guidance on how to provide it. So hopefully I meet that goal for you all today, because that was always a frustration for me as well. So let's start with a poll question. So we're gonna launch our first poll today. And I probably should have checked with Ashley. I don't know if oh, there it is. So can you answer this? Just gut reaction. Do people act differently when they go online? Yes or no? What do you all think? And I'm going to answer it too. Oh, no, I can't vote. So go ahead. I'm just going to give it a few seconds here for folks to, and then let's see where we all sit on this, because I think it's important to, there's a lot of us on the call today or on the webinar today, but I'm curious how we all view this idea, because I think it's really relevant to our work. And I'm going to talk about why that is. By the way, if you do prevention or outreach education, this is a great icebreaker question, especially if you work with youth, to kick off conversations about teen dating violence online and things like that. It's a great way to get people participating and thinking critically about the online spaces that they inhabit. So let's go ahead, if we can, let's wrap up the poll so we can see where people, let's see what the results. So 99% of you that responded said yes. Okay, so you know how hard it is to get 99% of this many people to agree on anything? So I'm encouraged by the fact that this is very consistent with what I see in my work, in my work in communities and with other organizations and with youth and with adults. Yeah, and I don't even think we really need to think about it, right? It's instinctive. And it's based on our lived experience, professionally and personally. We spend a lot of time online. I don't know about you, but I'm checking my phone. One of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning, and it's one of the last things I look at when I go to sleep. So, and then in between those waking hours, I'm online a lot. So I think I have, like we all do, have a lot of life experience, right? And by the way, when I ask youth this question, because they're getting online so early, they say the same thing, right? So there is some consistency there, and that's really important to understand. So follow-up question, and this is my last poll question, right? But if you had, so we'll go ahead and launch the poll here. If people are changing, if 99% of us agree that people are changing online, on average, when people change online, not all the time, but on average, do you think people on average tend to, when they change, to become better versions of themselves or worse versions of themselves? Which way? I know it's a nuanced question, but if you had to choose one or the other, in your experience, do you think on average people tend to be incentivized to become better versions of themselves or worse versions of themselves? Or just does this happen? How does this happen? What does your experience tell you? So because this is relevant to our work if we're spending all that time and all that time online, right? That if people are changing, are we going online and everybody's being awesome to each other and it's a much better experience than the physical world? Or when we're in online spaces, do we find that people tend to modify their behaviors in ways that maybe aren't so great, right? So let's go ahead and end the poll. Let's see where we ended up on this. So curious. Okay, so so this is super, I love this. Okay, so 56% of you said worse, 44% said better, right? And there's no right answer to this question, but I think it's relevant because for a couple of things. One, the fact that the majority of us think worse is significant because the individuals that are clients, the victims with whom we serve, are spending time in those spaces. And if they're interacting with people that tend to be modifying their behavior towards the negative, that's a risk factor, right? And then let's switch to the better side, because I really think, it is a nuanced question, so it's hard to answer. But I think on the better side, sometimes better can actually be worse, right? Because if you have, let's take dating, for example, online dating. If somebody is projecting a version of themselves they think is better, but that is not consistent with who they are, and they are meeting people and connecting with people under basically false pretenses, the person on the other end is, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the chat too, and some of the comments are really great. But even being that's not great for me. If I meet somebody online who I think is my soulmate, and then we meet in the physical world, and I don't say in the real world, by the way, I never say, well, in the real world this happens, because online is the real world, right? And so I say offline, online, or online in the physical world. And if and I meet them and it turns out they were basically selling me a false bill of goods, that's actually worse for me. Or if people are projecting a version of their life on social media, and this is particularly true for youth, that is performative, and that, hey, my life is so awesome because everybody else's life online is awesome, that actually can really damage your mental health, right? Because the pressure to be perfect is, there's studies on it, it's not good, right? And I see somebody wrote in the chat, if you ever play online games, I think pretty much everyone is worse because it's anonymous, right? So great segue to that, because what's going on here? Why do we all agree, most of us, 99% of us agree that people change online, and why is this happening? And why are people modifying their behavior as a result? Well, that point is really well taken. And hang on, somebody wrote, oh, can I get that back? Really appreciate the comment, Ray, the real word, especially thinking about how queer folks, people with disabilities, etc., can also find the bulk of their meaningful interactions online. Yes, Emily, thank you so much for writing that, because there are several reasons, and they've been brought up in the chat, as to why people modify their behaviors. And the first one is anonymity. But I always talk about in my presentations that we have to be careful about slamming anonymity or dunking on anonymity as the problem out there, because for people, especially folks from marginalized groups like queer folks, people with disabilities, who can't find those meaningful connections in the physical world and their communities, being anonymous online allows them to, one, be their authentic selves, two, allows them to escape abuse, three, allows them to connect with meaningful communities who they can connect with and feel comfortable with and feel good about themselves. So I would never argue or advocate for stripping anonymity from the internet. And by the way, do you think if we made it impossible to be anonymous online, that everybody would just start being awesome to each other? I think we all can agree. I'm just going to assume this one, that no, no, but being anonymous does make it easier for people to behave in unhealthy, abusive, or criminal ways online, because they're not held accountable for it, right? And that's something that is the calculus. Will I get caught? Will I get called out for doing something? And it's incentivizing for people to deviate from social norms, right? If nobody knows it's them, right? So there is a dark side to that. But it's not just anonymity. It's also no real-time consequence or communication. So a good example of this is in the physical world. If I'm walking down the street and somebody in their head doesn't like my haircut, my face, my outfit, and if they start trolling me by I'm gonna turn around, I'm just gonna start insulting this guy. You are so ugly, that outfit's terrible. What were you thinking? You should go home and burn it. There are real-time consequences to that action. I could turn around and come back at them. People might shame them. There are real-time consequences to that, right? And there's an opportunity for real-time communication and connection where I could say, hey, man, that's you're hurting my feelings here. Like, what's going on? Why are you so angry? And there might be an opportunity to connect and empathize and de-escalate. Online, almost impossible, right? It's just dropping bombs and then mic dropping and walking away, right? So really difficult. And no real-time consequence also can explain why we have this huge problem with people with cyber flashing, where very often male identifying individuals are sending unwanted nudes to female identifying individuals, right? And there's some great commentary in the chat. I love this. I wish I could focus on it. But keep it going, because this is super rich commentary that you're all providing there. But no real-time consequence, right? We have, the stats vary, but at least 50% of adult women have received, or female identifying individuals have received unwanted nudes, primarily from male identifying individuals. And there was just a study that came out that found that 75% of teen girls between the ages of 12 and 19 had received had been cyber flashed. So it is so prolific. But in the physical world, we don't have a bunch of young boys and men going around and flashing people, right? We don't. But online, it's much more, it's become normal, which is bonkers to me, because that's sexual violence, right? If you get arrested for flashing in the physical world, that you have to register as a sex offender, right? But online, it's just normal. Well, we need to, I do a whole other training on that, so I don't mean to get too off doing the weeds, but it's something that I think is a real opportunity if you're working with youth populations to use that as a case study for consent, because it's absolutely ridiculous that this has become so normal. And then we have an empathy vacuum, right? Where Empathy is the ability to identify with the emotions of somebody else. And the way we are taught from it's a learned skill. We're not born with it innately. Some people are better at it than others, but putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes and trying to empathize with them is really, really hard, I think, and made much harder by the internet. Because when we teach kids to be empathetic, we use teaching moments, right? Hey, you just took that toy. You just said something that really upset this other person, right? And the trusted adult, teacher, parent comes in and says, hey, look how upset they are. And what do they point to? Physical cues, body language, tone of voice, facial expression. What happens to all those physical cues when kids grow up online? They get vacuumed up by the internet, right? And so the lessons that we are teaching about empathy do not translate to online experiences. We need to adjust that. I do a whole other thing with that too. But and so all these things, it's not just anonymity, it's all these things working in unison to create an online environment that really incentivizes bad behavior, right? And so it's frankly, I'm surprised it's not worse sometimes, but it can certainly explain, especially if you're talking about youth whose brains are developing and are growing up online with little to no oversight or guidance, that and dealing with these factors, that we have the Surgeon General saying we have a national youth mental health crisis, right? Because the internet wasn't built for kids, right? I don't know that it was built for adults, frankly, but it certainly wasn't built for kids. So we need to adjust the way we talk about behavior, respect, kindness, empathy, consent, boundaries to encompass these online experiences. Okay, I've totally gone on a little bit of a rant there, but it's something that I think needs to be said, and something I'm really, really passionate about. Because there's no getting around technology. In today's world, it is required to survive and thrive. When a survivor is seeking to rebuild their life, they need safe access to technology, right? They have to have it. Asking somebody to go find housing or a job or public assistance or connect to other programs without being able to be online safely or access their technology safely is so unrealistic. It's like asking them to do it with both arms tied behind their back. They need to have access, which is why it's so critically important that we prioritize and help them prioritize their digital safety in the same way we prioritize physical safety, because they may not even be bringing some of this stuff up, because historically we have not prioritized digital safety in the same way that we prioritize physical safety. We focus heavily on physical safety. Our shelters focus heavily on physical safety. Confidential locations, locks, security systems, cameras, right? Rules about coming and going, all designed to protect the physical safety of the shelter residents and people coming in and out, right? We also need to think about their digital safety in the same way, because the last thing I think, or low on the totem pole of a domestic violence survivor fleeing an abusive relationship is, I really got to change my passwords, right? But they should, because if any of those accounts are compromised, as I'm going to talk about today, their physical safety can be compromised, right? And it's not surprising, because the average person has 80 apps on their phone. And if you don't think you have 80 apps on your phone, I encourage you to count them, because you'd be surprised at how many that you have, right? And the average person has 90 online accounts. So that's 170 different ways that somebody could monitor a victim, harass them, stalk them, steal information, send them unwanted information or photos, right? Track their location. There's all these new access points, because we live in a hyper-connected world now, and more connection means more opportunity to cause harm. And so our work needs to reflect that reality, which is why I do this work and why I'm going to be talking about what I'm going to be talking about today. Let's see here. This is great stuff. All righty. So all of this to say, this is my pitch for centering. Probably didn't even need to make the pitch to you all, because you're here. And I think if you work with some victims and survivors, the tech stuff is complicated and problematic. But this is why we need to not only center digital safety in our work, but help victims recognize that they need to prioritize their digital safety as importantly as they do their physical safety. An example of this is we all have, I think most of us have confidential address programs in our states, right? Well, I keep seeing people go through the process of getting into these programs, getting a PO box somewhere, and then their location is found out very quickly by their former intimate partner because they shared, they can still log into their DoorDash or Postmates account or Lyft or Uber. And all that work is blown up, right, by simply having access to that, right? But we're not thinking about that. But that's where we need to shift the way we talk to survivors about their safety. Okay, so if somebody wrote, "Oh, I do have a lot of apps," yikes, yeah. And so there are this idea of digital safety. Look, if I talk to a victim or a survivor and said, "Are you digitally safe?" Do you think they just provide me a very thoughtful and in-depth answer? Probably not, right? They'd probably look at me like, "What are you talking about, guy? Like, what does that even mean?" Right? And so we need to be able to define it for them. So I created a tool that makes sense for me in intimate partner relationships on how to determine or do sort of a small risk assessment on someone's digital safety during an intake or really at any time. So what you can do is, to me, and you're going to get this digital safety wheel in the resources, is you can ask them 3 questions, right? Because if they can't answer yes to these 3 questions, then they are not digitally safe, and it's worth exploring why that is. So number 1, the person needs to be able to access their technology freely. So that means no one's taking their phone away from them in a fight. No one is controlling their access to the internet, right? No one is, and I see my gracious hosts are putting resources in the chat. You'll also get these later, I think, but are you able to access your technology freely? Right? Is anybody shutting down the Wi-Fi in the home, things like that? Number 2, even if you have access, do you have control over your device's accounts and apps? That means the other person doesn't have your passwords and you have not logged in to your accounts on your current or former partner's devices. Because if you do, that's like a good example is like Instagram, right? How many of us who have Instagram ever log out of Instagram, right? We just close the app. But if we don't log out, then the person whose device we use, they can now access your Instagram account. So we need to verify whether they've shared passwords, which frankly, in a lot of cases, healthy, unhealthy relationships, people share passwords, people share devices, people share accounts. And I see somebody wrote, "Do you have this in Spanish?" So I do have, it's not in the resources that I'm sharing today, but I do have a safety planning tool in Spanish. So go ahead and email me and I can get you some Spanish resources for you. And then even if they have control and access, they need to be able to exist online without limitation or fear. That means when they go online, they're not getting harassed, they're not getting bullied, they're not getting stalked, they're not getting intimidated. And if a person can't answer yes to all 3 of these things, then it's worth pulling on that thread to ask why. Because I've worked on so many cases where people aren't even thinking about this. But if we are focused on their safety, then this has to be a component of the landscape, of their safety landscape, because the last thing we want is them being followed or tracked or intimidated and not even know it's coming. And the good news is, as I'm going to talk about, totally preventable. This stuff is totally preventable, but we just need to start prioritizing in our work. And I get it. We are busy. I don't know about you, but anytime when I was working at my nonprofit before, if someone would say, "Hey, we've got a new training, 2-hour training we get to attend," or this and that, I'd be like, I was not super excited. And I'd be like, great, I'm already super busy. I don't have time to, 1, go to a training, and 2, learn how to do new stuff in my work, right? But the good news is with this, it's not about becoming a tech expert. It's just about expanding, focusing on the things we're already focusing on, but expanding them to include the online stuff. right? It's not a new set of skills. It's expanding or adapting the ones we already use. Right? And I can speak from experience on this. Ashley, do we have any questions? I just want to make sure I'm making space for that. Or are we still good?
Yeah, let me read off here. Excuse me. Here's one that came in. Is it considered to be domestic violence if a vlogger, so with a V, posts his ex pic and full name on social media in bad faith?
Well, I would argue that could be a form of abuse called doxing. So doxing is basically violating somebody's privacy by sharing personal information about them online. So it might be, we see this a lot, for example, in the gaming community, where some gamer who doesn't use their real name and just goes by a username, has their address posted online and their phone number posted online so that people will start harassing them directly. So that's doxing. It is a crime in most jurisdictions. So I would argue yes. And I would argue it's harassment, right? It's a form of harassment. And if you're talking about getting a protective order, that's a form of harassment too. It's a tricky area because when I did a lot of restraining order work, it's like, well, this person is posting about me on social media and they're saying, and it's like, well, what are they saying? Well, they're saying they miss me and I broke their heart. It's like, you can't really stop them from doing that, right? And I don't know that a judge is going to order a restraining order based on that. But in what this question described, that's more specific. I think there's intent to post that as a form of harassment. And I think you can potentially make that argument.
Great. And then one other that got posted was, how can I protect my social security number after I've divorced my abusive ex?
Well, I would get what I would do is I would get a credit freeze. So you can work with the credit bureaus to basically put a freeze on your credit so that people can't open up any new accounts at all, period. And so using your social security number and then you have to approve them. It's a little cumbersome because then when you want to open stuff, you have to do it, but it's, we have to have these layers. If you're at high risk of identity theft or having people open accounts in your names, then you have to unfortunately add these extra layers of protection. I mean, on most of my accounts, I have multi-factor authentication. That is a pain to have to go through every time, but it makes me feel more secure that somebody can't get into my accounts. So I would do a credit freeze because there's no getting that social security number. And Laura writes, they need to notify their bank, the 3 credit reporting agencies, and the Federal Trade Commission. And I think SSA, Social Security Administration, that's what they advise. So that's amazing. And there's some great lender rights that you can place a block on your social security number as well. So yeah, there's lots, because financial crime, identity theft expands beyond obviously financial abuse and domestic violence situations and includes just really the general population as well. So they have created solutions for that and in the form of credit freezes and notification processes. So it's a great question. Was that it, Ashley, for now?
Those were the only 2 for now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So NNEDV, National Network to End Domestic Violence, did a survey of domestic violence advocates across the country a couple of years ago, asking about their confidence level in addressing tech-facilitated domestic violence. And what it found was that 87% of advocates did not feel totally confident in addressing tech-facilitated abuse. That's a problem when you look at the stats from like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, where they're seeing 100% increases in digital abuse calls. Right? That's not tenable. That's not sustainable. And we need to meet victims where they are and be able to address the abuse they're experiencing today, which tends to involve their technology, right? And so what I hear from a lot of folks is, well, what if I'm not tech savvy, right? Like I'm not comfortable talking about this stuff with a victim or survivor. I'm not comfortable with tech savvy safety planning because I'm not comfortable with technology. So the good news is, and I say this a lot, is you do not have to be a tech expert to keep victims safe in the digital age, especially when we're talking about domestic violence. And that starts with understanding why domestic violence victims are at extreme risk of being harmed via technology or at extreme risk of tech facilitated abuse. So really there are three things to consider here. One, there's a personal connection, right? It's not some random, cyber criminal in another country targeting you at random. This is somebody with a connection to the victim. They are personally motivated to harm the victim. And they've been in close contact with them, which creates opportunity. There's no hacking skills required in these cases, just opportunity. If hackers would be offended if you called some of these tech facilitated domestic violence situations hacking, because if my ex used to log into Amazon on my laptop and she saved her passwords, and then I go in and I enter her email and it autofills the passwords and logs me in, that's not hacking, right? That's just accessing an account without consent. So you don't need special skills, because the opportunity eliminates the need for those skills, because you can just walk. You don't need to pick the lock to get into a house when the door is wide open or you already have the keys, right? And that's the situation here. And then finally, they have or had the victim's trust, which gives them access to passwords and devices and personal information to reset passwords and things like that. So when you think about it, those three things really elevate the risk of tech facilitated abuse and domestic violence scenarios, but it also has a silver lining, because in the overwhelming majority of cases that I work on, when it involves or train others to work on it, we are not dealing with a tech expert, right? We are dealing with somebody who has an average level or the same level of tech expertise that we all have. It's really rare that a tech expert or a hacker is doing these things. So the good news is, if the person that is harming our clients is not a tech expert, then we don't have to be experts to act when a victim is being harmed online or via technology. And victims don't need to be experts themselves to keep themselves safe in the digital age. We can do really foundational, straightforward things. Because let's go back to that Amazon example. If I went and I was like, oh, I wonder what she's up to. I wonder where she lives now, or I wonder what she's ordering, right? And because I could go in there and be like, oh, she's ordering birth control or condoms. Oh, she must be with another guy, right? So if I went there and I typed in her email and the password autofilled and it was the wrong password because she had updated it, I'm not going to put on my hacker hoodie and crack my knuckles and start trying to hack Amazon, right? It will stop me from getting in, right? So we can deploy. It just gets back to this idea of treating digital safety with the same intention that we treat physical safety. People change their locks, right, on their house, but we don't always change the passwords. And password safety, which I'm going to talk about, is just, I talk to a lot of experts in cybersecurity and information security, and password safety, as boring as it is so important, especially when we're dealing with somebody who is on the inside. So let's talk about addressing and preventing tech-enabled abusive behaviors. Before I do, any questions, Ashley, that I should be addressing now before I move forward?
Nothing new, no.
Great.
Oh, wait, sorry. I take that back. There were two that popped in.
Okay.
I was looking again. So yeah, two, is there legal repercussion if the ex does enter an email to autofill the password after separated?
Oh, I'm going to give you a very lawyerly answer. It depends, right? So accessing somebody's accounts without consent, I would argue, especially if we're talking about like restraining orders or protective orders, is absolutely a violation of privacy. It allows somebody to stalk and monitor somebody and disrupt their life. It's a form of harassment. If you went to law enforcement and said, hey, my former partner is logging into my accounts because we used to share, they have my passwords. Do I think law enforcement's going to act on that? Probably not, unless it's part of a larger pattern of stalking. And I want to be clear, I'm not dunking on law enforcement. I work a lot with law enforcement. Like the rest of us, law enforcement is under-resourced, understaffed, and undertrained to properly address cybercrime. And so a lot of people get frustrated with law enforcement when they report these things. And Hillary, I see you asked, what's the safest way to store passwords? I'm going to talk about that later in the presentation, so I will get there. So So yeah, so probably not. It would probably have to be part of a larger pattern, I think.
Great. And yeah, how can we remove personal information from search white pages, websites like freepeoplesearch.com?
Yeah. Listen, I got you covered. Just if you can, I've got a slide on this. You're going to be getting a resource on this. I have got the coolest safety planning resource to protect ourselves and our clients when it comes to that stuff. So I've got something for you on that. All right, so let's, oh, sorry. Was that it, Ashley? I didn't want to.
Nope, go ahead.
Awesome. So let's talk about some common forms of tech facilitated harm. And just always keep in mind that when setting goals to address and prevent tech facilitated abuse, the first three goals I think are the same as any goal: stopping the abuse, preventing it from happening again, and holding the attacker accountable. But there's a fourth prong with online abuse, and that's removing harmful content, because whether it's image-based abuse or comments or whatever it is, that usually, very often when we're dealing with tech facilitated abuse, comes up. Now, the thing to remember here is, like I think we all know, if we're going to be survivor and victim centered, it's not, hey, let's take this down. Hey, let's hold this person accountable. Hey, let's block this person or do whatever. It's, hey, here are your options. Now you tell me what you want to do. How can I help you? How can I support you? What are your goals here, right? Because if something feels, just because something feels safe for you doesn't mean it feels safe for me. So, I think I'm telling you all what you already know, but I always think it's a good idea to reference survivor-centered practices whenever we can. All right. So let's talk about, now I am very intentional with my language here. I do not say hacking. One, because it's not usually hacking. It's not usually a hacker. And two, that's a term of art, and that can get lost in the translation. If you're reporting, if you say to a judge, hey, this person hacked, if a self-represented survivor is seeking a restraining or protective order, and they say, well, they hacked my account, the judge might think, okay, they are a hacker, and they used special skills to hack this person's account, and might believe, based on what they know of the person to be restrained, that they don't have that ability, right? And so that therefore it sort of discounts or invalidates the allegation of the survivor. So what we want to say, I think, is use clearer language that reduces reduces the possibility of miscommunication by saying accessing accounts without consent or accessing devices without consent. So instead of saying, hey, this person, hacked my email, we can say, hey, this person continued to log into my email from the computer we shared when we lived together after I moved out, and I did not consent to that. And that's how they knew where I was, or that's how they've been monitoring me. But a judge might respond to that and say, well, how do I know it's him? Or how do I know it's her? Or how do I know it's them? Right? Because Google's not going to tell me. And that's I don't like that question being asked, because a survivor, they're not going to they can't make Google tell them if somebody's getting into their accounts without consent. But the good news is we don't need to go to Google for this. I envision a world where a self-represented survivor or anybody, when the judge asks that question, we can say, so glad you asked, Judge, because I actually have some evidence for you that points at this person getting into my accounts without consent. So let's be a little interactive here, folks, and do an exercise using the case example I just described to verify whether the X party is getting into the victim's Gmail. Okay, so if you have, and you're going to be getting this explanation, a link to this resource in the resources, but let's go, if you're working with someone who feels that their Google account, and they have Gmail, is being accessed by their ex, let's go through how we can actually verify if that's really happening or not. Okay, so if you have a Google account, and if you're up for it, otherwise you can just follow along with my screen, go to myaccount.google.com, which, if you've never been to, is a good idea to visit, because it'll walk you through a privacy checkup, as you can see here. It'll let you know if there's any security issues found and things like that. So go ahead and type in myaccount.google.com. I'm going to assume most of us, if you're following along, have gone there. All right. So if you're there, go ahead. Let's see. I'll keep an eye on the chat too. Okay. We're still talking about Social Security. Okay, great. Go ahead and from this page, tap security. Tap security on the left-hand menu there. And when you tap security, it'll tell you if any security issues have been found, if you have two-step verification on, which is really important, means that if somebody who has your password tries to log in from a new device, they won't get in without a secondary code that's sent only to you. But from here, if you're working with this, and I see people are asking about the slides. I use a lot of slides. It's a really big file. And so what I've chosen to do instead is provide you with the resources that I'm talking about so you can actually apply the approaches that I'm covering in your work. So I hope that's helpful. I found that to be more helpful for folks. So tap security and then scroll down. So let's say you're working with this victim. They're saying someone's making changes, something's going on, and I want to be able to prove that it's my ex, right? So go ahead and tap security and then scroll down, right? And now somebody, so scroll down until you see your devices. And look right here, it says you're currently signed into your Google account on these devices. So right away, we can verify if any other devices are logged in. So somebody said lost audio. Hopefully you all can still hear me. So you can go down here and immediately see not only who's logged in. So right away, if only one device is logged in and it's the victims, then great. Then nobody else is logged in. That doesn't mean somebody else wasn't logged in before, but as it exists now, that person isn't logged in. Now you can tap manage devices right here, and it'll show you where you're signed in and start giving you more detail, like the type of device or the city that they're logged into. And you can tap even more details, and it'll tell you, maybe it'll give you the IP address or the browser it's signed in from, or right here, model iPhone X, right? So right here, if the ex-partner, if the victim doesn't own this phone and the ex-partner has an Apple iPhone X, right? That is, I've trained judges. I trained thousands of judges. They would love to have this information. Prosecutors would love to have this information because now we have breadcrumbs leading to the person, the ex-partner, right? And this, it doesn't catch them red-handed, but now we can peek behind the curtain and actually verify if someone's accessing the victim's account without consent, and we can learn something about them, right? And we can use that or not use it, depending on what the victim wants to do. But this should be standard operating procedure, I believe, for prioritizing digital safety. Is anybody else in your accounts? Because what a lot of people will say is, well, just update your passwords, which should work, but doesn't always work if the person's already logged in. It should log them out, but it doesn't always do that on every platform. It's sort of like, I analogize it to, if you have an intruder in your house and you go and lock the door, right, or change the locks and they're still in the house, that's not going to create a safe situation. That does not make, right? So we want to find out, take screenshots of this, and then you can tap, don't recognize this device, and eject that device from the account. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right? So now we're ejecting the device from the account. Then you update the password. And you can see here, you might even be able to get IP address, show IP address. Like, there's a lot of information here that you don't have to be a tech expert. Did anybody get lost in that explanation? Account.google.com, tap security, scroll down. Like, that's the approach, right? And I get excited about all of us doing this, right? And passing that information on to people in our community and to victims, right? Because it also empowers victims. Because if somebody has access, if our digital safety is compromised, it feels like any piece of technology or account that we use could be unsafe, right? And we should know if somebody else is in our house, and we should know if somebody is in our accounts. And I think somebody wrote, if a abuser goes in and changes and locks the password and locks the victim out. It's a really good question. It's problematic, which is why it's one reason why we need to prioritize digital safety early and often, right? Because that's an absolute risk. And I've done this training for people will say, oh, my ex's, which was a healthy relationship. Like advocates have told me, yeah, I just saw that my ex-partner just logged in 30 minutes ago. Now, I should say it may not always be nefarious, right? Or abusive when this happens, because, if like I've worked on with cases where people are just like, I didn't even know, like, yeah, they used to log in to Gmail from my account and I didn't even know I was still logged in. So it could be unintentional as well. It's not always, a real problem. So I hope that was helpful. And by the way, this is not just a Gmail thing. I cover this in my broader trainings, but it's really on any platform you can do this. Just Google, login activity and then enter the name of the social media platform or email or whatever. All right. Any questions? We've got about 40 minutes left. So we're doing great. Any questions on maybe one or two questions on that, Ashley? I'm happy to answer them.
Sure. Yeah, we had a lot come in. So let me see. One of the questions was about, is just changing our passwords enough? So thank you for addressing that. Excuse me. Let's see. So when a victim turns off the location feature on their cell phone, does this prevent someone from being able to access their location?
It should, yeah. If I'm logging into, if you're using Google Maps and you've turned off your location on your device, I'm not going to be able to log into your Google account and see where you are in that moment. I might be able to see the history of where you've gone, but if you turn off location services, just blanket turn them off so that nothing on your device is using location to function, then they shouldn't, if they're able to access an account without consent that uses your location, they should not be able to track you in that moment. The challenge is we use location. It's hard to use a device without location services. And I don't want the price of being safe to be going without certain beneficial technologies. Like a victim can't use the map function to get to, a job or interview or something like that because they're fearful they're being tracked. I would rather focus on how do we make those accounts safe so you can use your location services as intended. Somebody said, holy smokes, I just found a device online that isn't mine. The one thing that will be helpful for my clients. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, Stacy writes, I use Google Maps to navigate. It stores everything. Direction. So if you go to, I'll think of it. I'll think of it in a second, but because I've got a lot of energy right now, and I'm reading the chats. But if you go to, it's not account.google.com. It's it'll come to me. But you can toggle that off on Google Maps so it doesn't track you, because it'll track you even when you're not using the app, and create a very detailed pattern of where you are and where you go. So having control over that. I think it's myservices.google.com maybe. It'll come to me, hopefully. Anyway, maybe one more question, Ashley, if there is one.
Sure. So this is an interesting one, talking about cloud services. So how would you talk to a client about a shared cloud service when the client doesn't really entirely understand the technology and understand the dangers of a shared storage location?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way I describe it is look, your phone has a backup, right? And that's called the cloud. So that even if you lose your phone you can still access your photos and things like that if you log into Google or Apple, right? So it's meant to be convenient, right? As with most technology. But if you are saving things if things are getting backed up on your Apple or your Google account and you're sharing that account with somebody else, that means that person can see everything on your phone that you're backing up. And you may not want them to see that. Now, does that mean that we just say, just turn off iCloud backup? Well, that depends, because that could also create the unintended consequence of alerting the other person that they no longer have access, which could lead to an unintended consequence of them escalating abuse. Now, this is not a reason to not do it. It's just important that we talk through the unintended consequences. So that's how I say it. It's just a backup. It's just a backup that's not on your phone, right? And that other people can see. I also bring that up when I do a lot of youth present focus for trainings for people that work with youth, if you're going to start sharing nudes with somebody, ask your partner, where are you saving these? And do they back up to the cloud? And are you on a family sharing plan? Right? Because I do not want your brother seeing these things. Right? And so that's just a way to have, a more consensual conversation that a lot of people admittedly don't think about, right? That's happening. Okay, I'm going to keep going because we got about a little over 30 minutes left, and I got some good stuff I want to still cover. So stalking and non-consensual tracking, as was mentioned about the tracking, location services and turning them off, because it's almost always turned on, and because we use so many different accounts that track our location, if somebody has access to our accounts without consent, it puts them in a very powerful position to track our location without consent, right? And that's on the inside, but then there are also outside threats that we need to be aware of, like AirTags. This is coming up more and more. This is a new threat. This is a new risk factor that we need to be aware of, because even if we update, or even if a victim turns off location services, they can still be tracked without their consent by a personal tracker, right? Like an AirTag. Now, AirTags are, about yay big, about the size of a quarter, a little thicker than a quarter. And they're designed to make our lives better, right? By putting them on our keychain or on our bag or on a pet. And then it connects to your phone via Bluetooth. And if you can't find your keys, you can connect to the AirTag via Bluetooth and find that device. But we're seeing people use these as stalking tools, putting them in behind license plates and in bags and in children's items and in sunroofs and things like that. Now, you might be thinking, well, if it's Bluetooth, what happens when you're connected to a Bluetooth speaker and you start walking away? It disconnects, right? So why would that be a beneficial long-range stalking tool? If I drop an AirTag into my partner's car and they drive away, they're out of Bluetooth range in like 5 seconds. And this is where the magic of Apple comes in, because Apple says, well, we want you to find your stuff if you leave it in the back of an Uber, a Lyft, or a taxi. So we are going to turn our entire device network, over 1 billion devices with a B around the world, into a tracking network. So now every time your AirTag passes within a Bluetooth range, of any Apple device. Now it's got to have location, the Find My turned on their phones, but those are turned on by default. It tracks it for you. So now you have long range tracking. That's a real problem, right? And very accurate. I've tested it with consent on people. It works really well. So the good news is, if you're an iPhone user, it's constantly scanning for unwanted AirTags in real time, and will alert you if one is tracking you. How quickly? It should be within 4 hours, but a lot of bad stuff can happen within 4 hours, right? A lot of bad stuff can happen within 4 hours. And if you're an Android user, you get no update whatsoever. So there's no pop-up. Now there's an app you can download that will scan for AirTags, but doesn't scan them in the background without, it's not constantly scanning them in the background. You have to turn it on and you have to do some pretty complicated steps to search for them. So, and why would anybody who doesn't own an iPhone and doesn't own an AirTag download an AirTag Apple app, right? They don't do it. So, but it is a tool that you can use. But it's not just, and you're getting a guide and a toolkit on this, by the way. So, but it's not just the AirTags that we have to worry about. Tile existed before AirTags, the little square ones, and they just made an announcement that's not awesome. They basically, when Apple came out with AirTags about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, Tile followed suit and said, okay, well, we're going to help you track an unwanted AirTag. But then what is this date on this? February 19th. So just recently, and somebody wrote the AirTag should make a noise, right? It's true. It does make a audible beep if it's tracking you. The problem with that is it just doesn't beep. It's not very loud, and it doesn't beep in perpetuity. And if the AirTag is in, behind a license plate or deep in hidden somewhere in the car, you're probably not going to hear it. But with Tile, they said they had this safety app. They set it up so you could scan for unwanted tiles, and then they just announced that they changed it to make it tiles undetectable. So now you could put a tile on somebody and they can't use the app to detect it. If you turn the tile, you can render it invisible or incognito. And I got interviewed by NBC for this, and I laid into the CEO about this. But one of the things I said was this update denies stalking victims access to this most essential of safety features, the ability to verify and locate a tracker to stop the abuse, right? So that's a problem. All of which to say that the way to approach this, as you'll see in the guide you're getting, is to conduct a physical search, because we have two really great pieces of information. One, we know what these things look like. They're not invisible. This is not Mission Impossible or James Bond stuff, right? And two, we know where to look because they have to be on something that moves with the victim. So we go old school on this. We do a visual inspection. We look in the car, look behind the license plate, look in the trunk or in the glove box or underneath the floor mats, right? Or wedged into seats, right? You look in bags, look in a child's items, look around, conduct a physical search. And that is a very effective way to do it. And you can use the apps too, but physical searches, if tile has rendered it invisible, then we have to go old school, right? And so that's right. And there is no app in existence that just scans for all personal trackers. It doesn't exist. So we are left to roll up our sleeves and conduct physical searches. So that's how we can approach that. Any questions on the tracking piece before I move on?
I will say, just so everyone knows, that we're going to share the chat. There's a lot of really great stuff in there. I know someone had found how to also see who's logged in on Facebook, so that kind of information will be there. And maybe a good time just to kind of mention, you had said kind of earlier that it's not just Google where you can find these things. You can maybe reiterate what did you say to maybe type into to Google to find maybe where you check who's logged into your Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, those types of accounts.
Yeah, sorry, you wanted me to go over
well, kind of reiterate how people could search for those different ways to access that information for different platforms.
Sure. So just go, if you're worried someone's logged into your TikTok, for example, just go to Google and search login activity TikTok, and then go to, or see what devices are logged into my TikTok account or Instagram account or Apple or whatever. And it will tell you, it will take you to that company's website with instructions on how to do it. I don't include links to everyone because they change sometimes. And so it's just easier to conduct a search as well.
Is it possible, sorry, I assume that was all for that point.
Yes.
Is it possible for abusers to track victims through pets' microchips?
I have not. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think this might be a misconception about what microchips are, because this is something that I had a misconception of. It's less of a GPS tracker than it is if you scan a pet that you find that's a stray, you can find that information. But I suppose if you were to update that microchip, right, and then the perpetrator, kidnaps or dog naps the dog or the cat and then takes it to a vet and say, can you help me find out whose pet this is? It will provide a new address. But, there's the point of they would have to know the address first to find the pet. So, it seems like it's maybe I'm overcomplicating things.
No, it's just not you're 100% right. It's not, they're not I suppose they do make ones that track, but it's not, I don't know. I haven't run across a case with those. More likely. So Ashley described it perfectly. And the other thing I will mention is you're more likely to run into problems with, even then. Okay. So one way I suppose this could happen is they make Chipolo makes basically Bluetooth trackers for dogs, but they're not embedded underneath their skin. They're just put on their collars. So I suppose if you hacked into the person's Chipolo account and were monitoring where they were, they could see it. But it's not usually, the microchip thing is not a problem I've run into.
Makes sense. If you find an AirTag or other tracking device, is there a way to find out who owns it?
Yes. So Apple, because they got a lot of heat for this, they will cooperate with law enforcement. So if you take it, now a couple considerations here. One, because the good news is to use an AirTag to stalk somebody, you have to register it to your Apple ID. You can't just to turn it on and use it. It has to be registered to your phone. So that creates a link, an evidentiary link to the perpetrator. Then if you find one on you, Apple has been very clear, and they have followed through on this, that they will cooperate with law enforcement to give them the identity of the person who purchased and used the AirTag. You can also, if you're worried about taking the AirTag to law enforcement and then having the person see you're going to law enforcement, you can also, you can have law enforcement come to your house, or you can unscrew them and pop the battery out and turn them off is another way to do this. So you definitely, it's historically reporting this, getting law enforcement to get this information from big tech is not, we don't have a great track record for that, but this actually with Apple, it works pretty well.
Great. And one more question in that topic of can people, and so kind of like the Apple ecosystem, can people be tracked by services like Apple AirDrop?
Not with AirDrop. AirDropping is more, I mean, you could, I guess, theoretically now, and this is something I've hypothesized, but have not seen in practice. If I wanted to know if somebody was in their home, a partner was in their home, and I knew what their phone ID was, whether it says, iPhone 86 or, Jennifer's iPhone or whatever it is, if I'm outside their house and I turn on Bluetooth AirDrop, it will show me whoever's in Bluetooth range. And so I would be able to see maybe if that person's nearby or in their home. So it's a way, it wouldn't track their direct location, but it might tell me if they're in range, right? And so that's the only way. I don't know that that's a huge risk factor. But it's a good question. It's a really good question. Okay. See how we doing on time? We got about 21 minutes left, coming in hot. Okay. So image-based sexual abuse, non-consensual pornography, the sharing of intimate images without somebody's consent, huge problem. Threatening to do it, we refer to that as sextortion, or actually doing it is non-consensual pornography. So let's talk, this is the weaponization of intimate images is modern sexual violence, right? And I see somebody saying, what's the purpose of making it invisible, one of these trackers invisible? Is this an anti-theft thing? If somebody steals your luggage and you've got a tile in there and they just turn on the tile app to see if they're being tracked, if there's a tile, they can turn on the tile app and verify whether there's a tile in the suitcase. And so that's why people want to render them invisible, just to throw that out there. So one huge problem with image-based sexual abuse and sextortion is victim blaming. Bella Thorne was getting sextorted by somebody who hacked her iCloud account and got a topless photo of her. And rather than giving into their demand, she posted the topless photo on herself to take the power away from the criminal. And the next day on The View, Whoopi Goldberg, who I like, victim blamed her so hard, saying she should have never taken the photo, what she think was going to happen. And this is digital. This is like the digital short skirt phenomenon, where it's just like saying, what did that sexual assault victim think was going to happen when they wore that outfit or went to that party or drank too much, right? Abuse is never the victim's fault, but we have to realize today, victim blaming, and I do a whole training on this, but for today's purposes, victim blaming has gone digital. And that means it's not just, people in our physical, in our friends or our support network that can victim blame victims now, or blame victims for their own abuse now, but it's very public now, and other people can pile on. So it's really critical that we constantly remind victims that the abuse is not their fault, because they'll hear things like, well, hey, I'm getting harassed on the site. Well, just block them. It's like victim blaming, right? Like, why are we focusing on what the victim should do? Why don't we say, how do we make this stop? Or what do we, Heidi, I see you're talking about deepfakes. I do whole trainings on deepfakes and stuff like that too. But yes, deepfakes are deeply problematic because you can generate non-consensual pornography with actually having the intimate image of the person, but that's a whole other thing. But the point is we need to, one, let victims know that the abuse is not their fault because they're hearing it more and more. And two, we need to intervene when people do this, either by helping them understand that what they're doing is that they're focusing on the victim's behavior as opposed to the person's behavior that's causing the harm. Right. So I will tell, and then I'll try to give people tools. Like instead of saying, why don't you just block them? Or why don't you just do this? I say, how can I help you? What do you need? Right. And it's always a good idea to just focus, just reframe it instead of saying, she is getting, she's on Instagram and these things are happening to her or him or them, saying this person has created anonymous accounts and is harassing the victim. If you change just the point of view, studies have shown that people are less likely to victim blame. And victim blaming, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that like, this is the bane of a lot of our existence. Because it's so easy and it's often done unintentionally. Right. And people will post this stuff online where it's like, well, what they think was going to happen, or, people who are getting sextorted or dating scams. It's just like, well, I would never be that stupid. And it's like, it's victim blaming, I think, is fascinating because people just instinctively do it, right? Without even realizing it. And the victim may not even realize it, but it starts to create a mindset that it is their fault and they do need to do things. But we have to focus on, especially when it's hard to hold the person doing the engaging in the abuse online accountable. If they're anonymous or they're hiding behind a big tech platform, it's easy to want to focus on what the victim can do to protect themselves, but we have to focus on the platform and the person doing the harm first. And that's all I have to say about that, but it just drives me bonkers. Tech-enabled trauma is a big deal. It often gets considered to be sort of a second-class form of trauma, but it's not. Trauma that is a tech-enabled abuse is unique and pervasive, and so is the trauma, right? And if people aren't digitally safe, then they're not safe anywhere, which is why we need to talk to them about their digital safety so that they can get clear on it, and we can focus on how to make sure that they are safe online and off. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but people will often discredit online abuse as being not as serious as physical abuse, and that is not true. We cannot judge the severity of a form of abuse based on whether it happens online or offline. It depends on the facts, depends on the experience of the victim. So we need to start disrupting that myth whenever we can. Because, Jennifer Lawrence about 5 years ago and a bunch of other celebrities talked about having her nude images hacked and leaked online. And she says, anybody can go and look at my naked body without my consent any time of the day. Someone in France just published them. My trauma will exist forever. And that's the thing. That photo gets posted online. Pre-internet, if somebody showed that photo around, it only existed in their memories. But now I put it online and it exists forever, right? That is amplifying abuse. That is not making abuse less traumatic when it goes digital, right? And people need to understand that. Sorry, I'm getting fired up right now because it frustrates me. So when we need to navigate the tech-enabled trauma, setting expectations that, hey, it's challenging to hold people accountable for doing abusive or unhealthy things online, but it doesn't mean that we won't try, But in the Jennifer Lawrence example, if she came to me for help, I would have said, look, you have to live the rest of your life knowing that image could show up again. There's no way you can scrub it from the internet, but there are things we can do. So you have to be vigilant about taking it down, right? So that's acknowledging the challenge. We still want to offer the resource, mental health, housing, legal advocacy, case management. They still need this, right? We want to do our best to hold offenders accountable, like verifying whether somebody's in their accounts and seeing if we can connect it to that person. And then we want to provide actionable advice, like what I've gone over today. Like, here's how you kick somebody out of your account. Here's how you verify here's how we can tell whether there's a personal tracker in your car. Or with image-based abuse, if someone's threatening to post images online, you can go to this website, which you're going to get in the resources, stopncii.org. Transcript.org, where it's a nonprofit that's partnered with all the big social media platforms. And if a victim is getting threatened with a nude image being posted of them without their consent, then they can go here, create a fingerprint of the photo without ever giving the photo over. And then those social media platforms will use that, basically feed that fingerprint to their algorithm. And if anybody tries to upload that photo, people they will be prevented from doing so, or to be taken down immediately. So this is a cool preventative tool that's being provided to victims and survivors. But I'm constantly, if you work with youth, I'm not an abstinence-only education person. You know, you have to, teens are having sex. We want to make sure they're having it safely. And teens are sharing nudes and sexting, and adults are doing it too. We want to make sure they're doing that safely too. So when we share nudes, no faces, no identifying information, cover everything up with a smudge tool or an emoji, things like tattoos or birthmarks. Use a neutral background, right? So that even if somebody does decide to post it or threatens to post it, it can't be linked to the victim, right? Or they have plausible deniability. So that's a really good practical thing. Talking about airdropping, which was mentioned earlier, people are engaging in cyber flashing through airdrop, where they are, here's the thing, airdrop is, and this works on Android phones too, it's called nearby share. So you could be walking along and all of a sudden you'll see a notification like the one you see here with like somebody's genitals. And it says, do you want to accept or decline this? And so now I've been flashed without my consent, right? Decline, right? But I didn't want to see it in the first place. So in order to prevent this, what you want to do is turn airdrop or nearby share off or set it to contacts only. That way, if you're on an airplane or on a bus or in a subway, people can't just drop these things onto your device without your consent. So it's just a techie way to prevent that from happening. And it can be really traumatic to receive these things. All right, let's talk about safety planning really quickly, and then we'll take some questions, okay? So just a couple things on this. One, privacy, right? We want to keep victims and survivors' privacy intact. We don't want people knowing where they live, what their contact information is. And this was a question asked earlier. How do we make sure? Because if I Google a victim's name in the internet search, all these data broker sites are going to come up where I can learn things about them that they don't want me to know. So here's a resource, like they could go to fastpeoplesearch.com, which look yourself up on this and see if anything comes up there and that is concerning to you. You can go to fastpeoplesearch.com/removal to take yourself off of it, or you can use this resource, which this is an open source Google Doc by ethically minded security professionals who have created about 40 different data broker sites, not created, but list 40 different data broker sites, and within specific instructions on how to remove yourself from those sites. So it's a DIY way to get yourself off these sites. Great safety planning tool for victims. Great safety planning tool for people that work with victims, because we don't want people knowing where we live either, right? So this should be, I think, either if you can go over it with a victim, great, it takes some time, or at least give them this resource, right? It's a great way to get off these sites and keep our privacy intact. Bo, you said, where can we get this? It's in the link right above your comment. So go ahead and you can tap that, and this is going to be emailed to you as well. Or you can use this QR code. So I really covered all my bases here. You can tap it in there, or you can use this QR code. So I'll just leave this up for a second. No problem, Bo. There's a lot of information in the chat, so don't even worry about it. Someone's asked, what was the Fast People Search removal option? It's fastpeoplesearch.com/removal. So just put the website /removal, and then you can follow the steps to opt out, or you can use this data broker resource, and it's listed there as well. Okay, hopefully everybody captured this and is able to use it. Whoops. Another thing I want to mention safety planning wise is, a real challenge for me when I was working in direct services was when victims would have pictures of their injuries or destroyed property, and there was a good chance they would go back to the person, back to the relationship. How do we save those photos of evidence or nude photos or whatever it is, and save them safely on the victim's device without fear that they will be deleted when they go back to the relationship? And so a little trick that I like to use, whether it's hiding nudes or hiding evidence, is so here's the thing, whether it's on an iPhone or on an Android phone, you can edit the photo to look like something else. So, and it's never permanent. So you could zoom in and crop a photo to make it look like a blurry mistake photo or like something else in the corner, and always revert back to the original. But it hides in plain sight in the thousands of photos on your camera roll as something else. So if somebody was going through the victim's phone here, trying to find incriminating photos or nudes or evidence of abuse, if you tapped, they'd go to this Sunset album and think, oh, I don't see anything here. But then this is on an iPhone. But if you tap that photo, you click edit, and down in the bottom right-hand corner, it says revert. Well, if you tap revert, it's actually a picture of the victim on vacation with their ex that they didn't want their current partner to know about. So you can save these things in plain sight. Is it perfect? No. If somebody wanted to go through every photo in their photo reel and click on the photo, click edit, and then see if there was a revert option, then they could do that. But does that happen? Is that likely to happen? No. And then if you want to resave it, you just click edit, zoom in and crop the photo in the upper right-hand corner. And now it's just a photo of and I'm just blanking on the name, but of the ocean, okay, for lack of a better word. But this is a way, or abuse, like if somebody has a picture of their arm with a bruise on it, you zoom in on, make it look like a blurry photo of their shirt or something like that. I just got an alert that my laptop is plugged in, folks, but maybe it came unplugged at the source. Hang on, I don't want my computer to die while I'm giving this presentation. There we go. So this is and again, not techie, right? This is a really straightforward way to do this. Finally, passwords, right? This was a question earlier. We want to create, if we have an average of 170 accounts and apps, right? We don't want to reuse passwords, but most of us do reuse passwords, right? And this is a good rule, even if you're not in an abusive relationship. If somebody gets into your account and gets one password because there was some data breach with, your hotel, rewards account, you don't want them using that password to get in to your accounts, right? Well, it's the same thing with victims of domestic violence. They usually share passwords. We don't want that one password giving access to other accounts. So the move here is to use a password manager, not necessarily LastPass. Sorry, I'm reading the chat. I'm going to focus on you all. Sorry. Not necessarily LastPass, 1Password. There'll be some. I'm giving you an article that lists how they work and different options to use from Consumer Reports, which is really good. Anyway, this creates really unique passwords for each one of your accounts. So you only have to remember one password, the password to your password manager, and the password manager does the rest of the work. This will keep you safer, right? By, unless you have a photographic memory, no one's memorizing 170 unique passwords. So this does the work for you, right? It's just security. People are asking, this is great. Can we have this resource? You're going to get it all. You're going to get all. You won't get the slides, but you're going to get all the resources. So don't worry. So to close out, and then I'll answer maybe a couple questions. The Supporting Deaf Victims in the Digital Age webinar, it's been coming through in the chat, thankfully. But if you want to register, it's going to be recorded, so you can still attend, even if you can't make it on this date. But it's going to be highlighting domestic violence in the deaf community. It's going to talk about how the tech used by deaf folks in general and how that can be misused to cause harm and how we can address and prevent it. And there'll be a ton of resources about working with deaf domestic violence survivors in general. And it's Rachel just put it in the chat too. So thank you, Rachel. So there are opportunities there. And then my newsletter, if you want to sign up for it again, or you can email me. I do a lot of trainings. I do a lot of presentations for and keynotes and all that good stuff on online harassment, victim blaming, safety planning, advocacy, tech-enabled trauma, online dating safety, sexual exploitation online, sexual violence online, just really a really pretty like 20 different courses. And then I just do like an overall training for domestic violence organizations. It's about 2 hours on that covers sort of everything that I think folks need to address and prevent from a safety planning and screening standpoint. So feel free to reach out if that's helpful to you. But if I can answer, I know we only have a couple minutes, but Ashley, I see there's a lot of questions in the Q&A, but you want to get, and thank you
Yes.
for the kind words in the chat. That's really awesome.
Yes, I don't know that we have much time left for questions. So I think it's just best to kind of reiterate what you said about how to stay in touch with you, because a lot of these questions I'm sure could be answered by additional trainings that you offer. I'll of course share the list of questions that we have left over. Adam, if there's any specific resources we can add to the list based on those questions, we'll do that. But I think the main takeaway at the very end is connect with Adam and follow his, sign up for his newsletter, follow him on, whatever platforms you're using, because as you've all learned, and as I know, he's a fantastic resource in this area. So with that, I mean, is there anything else that you'd like to say to close us out today?
No, I'm going to be on a real self-esteem high reading all the nice kind things people are putting in the chat. So thank you, everybody. It means the world to me that you spent an hour and a half with me today, and that you went out of your way to say to tell me how it impacted you. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate the work you all do.
Of course. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And really quickly, we'll wrap up here before we go into the demo with CAP 60. So please stick around if you'd like to learn more about CAP 60. But just a quick reminder that we will share the webinar recording, the transcript, certificate of attendance, and then that list of shared resources that we've mentioned, as well as the chat. We'll make sure that the chat is in that folder. So we'll send that out to everyone within 1 week of today. If you are calling in right now, so you're just dialing in on your phone, not logged in on Zoom on your computer, send us a quick email to info@domesticshelters.org just to let us know where we should email those materials. But with that, we'll conclude this part of today's presentation. Thank you so much again, Adam. And we'll welcome Sean to talk a little bit more about CAP 60. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, of course.
That was some really interesting. I was actually following along and doing some of that stuff myself. So that was a really great information there. I think it's useful for everybody, domestic abuse survivors as well as just everybody. I found that to be incredibly useful. So today I want to show you a little bit about CAP 60. So what CAP 60 is a data management system for tracking client data and services so that you can report those, of course, to your funders and make sure that you're reporting what they need, you're getting accurate numbers, and you're able to maintain or even increase your fundings. So what I'd like to do today is kind of show you a little bit of the system. You can see how it works. It's got a lot of really cool features within it. And let me see, I need to share my screen here. There it is. I'm going to show you guys one like that. Now, hopefully you all can see my my screen. It's blue. It says, "Welcome, Sean Piotr." That's me. Are people seeing this?
See it.
Yes. Perfect.
Yes,
all right,
it's
great.
up on there.
Great. All right, so I'm going to move the chat box over here so I can see if anybody does have any questions or anything from me as well. So do feel free to ask questions if you have any when I go through this as well. So the CAP 60 system, like I says, data management system, and what you're seeing is what you would see when you log into the system. A little bit about it. This blue bar across the top, you'll notice there are different links up here. We call these modules, and each module is going to govern a different area of the system. And when you click on a module underneath it, we're going to break it down into smaller sections. And then when you go into one of the sections are the pages that you can access on the side here. And that's how navigation works. Now in the system, you can actually set up different user groups and authorization settings so that people have access to what they need. A lot of agencies do this based on job description. Intake workers might access certain things. Advocates will access other things. Admin can usually access everything. But this is up to the agency. The agency can set these however they want. And when they set these up, when someone logs into CAP 60, they're only going to see what they have access to. They're not going to see anything that's not part of their job. They only see what they need. So they won't go into any areas they're not supposed to go in, and they're not going to accidentally do something they're not supposed to do. And again, those are under the agency's control, so they can always change and edit those anytime they need to. So what I want to do today is I want to show you how the intake works, how to add a client into the system, and then we'll go over some of the basic things that we can track and stuff in here. Just kind of go over general information. So if you notice, I'm in the client module, and I went to my intake section, and we have this victim services page on the left. This is your normal intake. When you're sitting face to face with your client, you're going to capture information. We do have an intake specifically designed for human trafficking agencies as well, and we also have a hotline intake designed for use with crisis lines and hotlines and stuff like that, because of course you have less time and you need to capture the basic information and help the client as much as possible. So we do have some of those extra ones, but I'm going to go through the basic victim services intake. And it starts with just some general information on the client here. You can enter clients anonymously. So if they don't want to give their name, you can put them in the system anonymously. You'll notice there are fields that have red stars. A red star means that field is required. And we do this because we have a duplication check built in. So it makes sure that the client's not already in your system. That way you're not going to end up with duplicate clients, duplicate counts on your reports, things like that. Now, again, like first name and last name, if you put them in anonymously, it's going to automatically generate the first name anonymous and the last name's a unique number set. So you don't have to worry about those. It will put them in automatically for you. You can use the system with multiple different centers. If you have more than one center, you can track different centers in here and such like that. All right, so I'm going to do. Put in a name. For sex, we do have male, female, and other. So if you do choose other, there is a gender identification drop down to the right here, and that is customizable because there are different terminologies, new ones pop up. So this way you can make sure you're tracking and using the terminologies that you're familiar with and that you need to report on. So that is a customizable gender identification drop-down menu that you can use. For birth dates, sometimes the client will actually give you their birth date, which is great. You can put that in for your demographics. But if the client does not, maybe they just give you their age. I am 23 years old. You could put a fake birthday and mark it. So that way for your demographic reports, you'll still get their general age for the demographics, but you'll know that this is not their actual birth date. Or if they don't give you any of that information, you can mark age not tracked. And then on your reports, it'll show that you were not able to get that information. You can also capture contact information and mark whether or not it's safe to use this contact information. And now, once you have this basic information filled out, when you click next, the system will run its duplication check. So it's going to make sure that this client does not already exist in your database. If it does, it's going to let you know, and you can actually just go in and start working with the client. You don't have to redo the intake. You can start providing additional services, put them in your shelter, whatever you need to do with the client. You can go in and work with them directly. If it does not find a match, then it's going to take you to the next step, which is the safety assessment. Now, this is an optional page. A lot of agencies do like to run a safety assessment, so we do have one built in here. And this was created with our victim service clients. So they actually told us these are the things we want on this. So you can for assessment, but you can also set it up so that you can skip this page if it's not something you want to do. So you can set it up so you can skip right past the page. The primary victim information, this is where you're going to capture your demographic information for your client. You'll also notice, again, there are red stars denoting required fields, but here you can set which fields you want to be required. So that way you're making sure you capture the information that you need for your reporting. So you can come in and you can capture that information. We do have a few things pre-built in here. You'll see there's characteristics, classifications, disabilities. These things are on a lot of the federal funding reports. So we do have those. So you do have those pre-built in here. That way you can make sure you're tracking them and reporting on them. There is also this additional characteristics section, and this section is completely customizable. You can create your own characteristics to track, and they can be anything you want. What you're seeing on the screen here, these are just examples, like offender lives at the home or something like that. So you can, again, you can create any kind of additional characteristics, and you can check off multiples as well. So you can have any additional characteristics that you might want to track and report on. All right, once we have the demographic information for our primary client, when we hit save and continue, we go to the shelter assessment. Again, this is another optional page. If you have a shelter and you'd like to do the assessment, you are more than welcome to. Again, this was also designed with our victim service clients. So these are all questions they wanted on the shelter assessment. So it's designed specifically with them. So again, you can go through, you can fill this out if you'd like to, but you can also skip past it if it's not relevant to you. So you don't have to fill it out. You do have that option to go by. The family information page, this is where you have your household demographics, county, residence number, and household, that kind of stuff. You can also put in living and mailing address. So you have all of that available in here. You can also create your own household characteristics. So just like you could with an individual, you can have household characteristics as well. Again, those are completely customizable. There's also a needs section, which is customizable. So you can create and track different needs for your clients as well. So you do have that available to you. Once you fill out your family information, there's the household members. Now, some agencies just track the client. And if that's the case, you click next and you move on to the next page. You do not have to add household members. But some agencies want to track, children or spouses or anyone else who might live in the house. So for that, you can click add household member. It's all the same information that you could fill out for the primary victim. You can fill out for household members as well, in addition to their relationship to that primary client. So you can have their relationship in there. And any household member that you enter into the system, they can also receive services and be clients if you want them to. So you don't have to do a separate intake for each person. You can do the whole household, and then everybody can get services and can be counted as clients if you want them to. So you do have that ability in here as well. After the household members is the offenders. So here you can track offenders. This is optional, but you can track offender information. So you can go in, if you don't know the offender's name, you can put them in anonymously. You can enter identifying information, descriptions. You can also put vehicle descriptions in here as well. What's really great about this information is this is searchable. We do have an offenders search. So, if you see someone suspicious hanging around, or you see a car parked outside for the last couple of days, you can put that information in there and see if it matches any of the known offenders in your system. So you can search by that as well. And you can enter multiple offenders. So if this client has more than one offender, you can click add offender and you can enter in as many offenders as you need. So you can track multiple offenders in the system. After the offender information is the victimization information. So in here, there are a few required fields because these are things that, again, are oftentimes on your federal funding report. So we want to make sure they get captured so you can report on that information. You can say which household member was the victim. Are they primary or secondary victim? So you can track both primary and secondary victims in the system. If you did capture offender information, you can connect the offender to the victimization. So you can have them connected directly to that victimization. And you can have up to 3 offenders per victimization. So you can have multiple offenders on victimizations as well. And you can say what their relationship is to the victim as well. There is a list here for primary abuses experienced, so you can grab the primary abuse. This list is taken directly from the VOCO report, so it has that full list on there. If there is anything on this list you don't do at your agency, you can actually remove it from the list, so you'll only see what's relevant to you. But you can enter in the primary abuse experience. That's all the required stuff. After that, everything else is optional, but you can capture secondary abuses, and you can have multiple secondary abuses if needed. So you can track secondary abuses, weapons used. This is a customizable list, so you can have your own list of weapons that you might want to track or report on. Was this reported to the police? How long did it take to be reported? What was the officer's name? What was the police department name? Who reported the crime? Was it the victim or someone else? And if it was someone else, what's their relationship to the victim? And at the bottom, again, there's some different check boxes. Again, these are things that you're going to find on federal funding reports. So you have those in there as well, and you can check those off. And then you can save that victimization. And you can have multiple victimizations if needed. So if the client has been victimized more than once, or if multiple people in the household have been victimized, you can add those additional victimizations in, and you can track all of that information in here. Okay. After your victimization information is income. Now, I know some agencies don't track this, some do. If you don't track it, you click skip and you move right past this page, so it doesn't, you don't have to worry about it. But if you do track it, you can enter in, the income range. You can say what their main source of income is, and you can also mark down any other income sources that they might have. And that income source list is customizable. So it can be whatever income sources you need to track and report on. So that's completely customizable. After our income is the services page. So if you do provide services during intake, you can capture them here. If not, you can skip past this and go right to the submit page. But if you are providing services during intake, you can come in here and you can enter that information. The type of service, we have 2 different categories. There's victim services. These are services that are provided to the victims of crimes. And then there's non-victim services, which are services that can be provided to anybody or not necessarily have to be a victim of a crime to receive it. That division is basically in here for reporting purposes. There are some reports that only want you to show services for victims of crimes, and some of them that want to see everything. So that's why we have those 2 in there. It is, so I have a question. Is CAP 60 the same type of program as Osnium? It is very similar to Osnium. Yes, we are a data management software like Osnium is. We have very different features. And my opinion might be a little biased, but I do think we do offer a bit more. But yes, it is a very similar in scope to that. It does help you track services, programs, and client information and generate those reports that you need for your funding. Thank you for your question. All right, so back to the services. So then you can say which family member is receiving those services, which victimization, if it is a victim service, which victimization are these services related to, so you can have that correlation in your system. And then you can specify what program and funding source is being used for these services. Now, the ones you're seeing here are just examples. That's customizable. So it can be your funding sources, your programs. These are just examples in here. All of that gets customized to whatever you call your programs and to whatever funding sources you're using. You can specify which staff member is providing these services, and also if a volunteer assisted, you can say which volunteer assisted with those services. And then you'll see your list of services. This is just a short list. There's no limit to this list. You can have as many services as you want. Again, you can divide them up between different programs. The services you're seeing here are just examples. These are also customizable. So it'll be whatever you call your services, whatever names you give to your services. We have a question here. Is CAP 60 HIPAA compliant? Yes. Yes, we have lots of security features, maintain all of this information. So yes, we do follow all those guidelines to make sure that this data is safe and secure. All right, so again, you have your services down here. You can provide then multiple different services if you'd like to. You can provide multiples of the same service. And you can also track how much time was spent per service. So once we enter that information in there and we click that save and continue, it's going to save those services and it takes us to the submit page. Now, once you hit submit, it's going to take you into the client management area. You're going to see some new sections open up on this white bar, and you're going to be able to do more. You can put them into shelters. You can put them into transitional housing, provide more services, collect more data, whatever you need to do. But the intake will be done, so you can also go and do an intake with another client if you need to. Now, if for any reason intake gets interrupted and you're not able to finish it, the next time you look up a client in the system, you'll see that their intake is in progress, and you can click on a link and you can jump right in and pick up right where you left off. So you don't lose that data, and you can just finish the intake and then go right into client management with them. So all of that still gets saved, and then you can finish from where you left off at. All right, so I'm going to click on the submit just real quick. I want to show you some of the different things we can do in here. So of course, you can always track additional services after intake. You can add in additional services provided at any time. We have a full shelter section, which does allow you to check clients into shelters. You can even track beds, what beds are available, stuff like that. We have the housing section for transitional housing, so you can track people in there. Counseling, we have a counseling calendar. You can schedule appointments for counselors, track counseling notes, those kind of things. We also have a legal section. You can track things like protection orders, court cases. You can set appointments with your legal staff. If you have a legal staff, you can set appointments with them. We also have a survey section. That safety assessment and that shelter assessment you saw can be found in here, and you can redo them at any time. You can also create your own surveys and have clients take those. We also have a tool called the Self-Sufficiency Matrix, which allows you to create your own assessments. Going into what we saw in the webinar today, how he was talking about you can have an assessment about their online safety, their digital safety. You can create an assessment for that in here, and you can track that assessment. And not only can you give them that and see where they stand, you can give that over time and see, have they improved? Has their digital safety improved, and so on and so forth. So you can create those kind of things in the system as well. So those are all the different things we can do. I just want to show you really quickly. In the victim services, this is our agency-wide area. You can see here the shelter. What's really cool in here is you can actually go in and you can see everyone who's checked into your shelter. You can see, if you have any beds open in your shelter, so you can actually see all of that. So it makes shelter management very easy. You can also track items you give, like if you give them toiletries or bus passes, you can track those kind of things. There's a full inventory module in there that lets you track and keep count of all that. You can also check things in and out. I know, like space heaters or blankets or stuff like that. You can see who you checked it out to. They can sign for it, so they know they have to give it back as well. So you can actually track all those different things within your shelter. I know we have kind of a short amount of time. I'm just trying to give you a good idea of what's in there. And then, of course, in reporting, we have all the major funding reports. We have FIPSA, VOCA, we have the STOP and Muskie report built in, and just a full range of other reports to help you generate any kind of information you might need to provide to funders and such. So that's, again, that's a really kind of a general overview of what we do. We would love to hear from you guys and see if you'd like to set up a demonstration. Yes, it is VOCA compatible. We have the VOCA report actually built into our system. So we do have the full VOCA report in here as well. So yes, so you can see it breaks it down, has all the different areas, and you can even go in and you put in the quarter that you want to look at, and boom, it brings up the quarterly report for that and things like that. Emergency contacts, yes. You can put in emergency contact information. And also, I do want to mention too, the system is very customizable. We can always customize and add things because, of course, no two agencies are the same. And we know this going in, we believe this to be true. And so we made this system so that it is very, very flexible, and it's able to be kind of changed in areas as things are needed. So we can do all of those kind of different things as well. But we'd love to invite you to come see a demonstration, a full demonstration of the system, so you can see all the different things we can do. I believe Ashley, you have that information, right, that you provide to them?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen too.
Okay, great.
Take over if you don't mind. That way I can pull
go
up
right ahead.
all this information. Let's see. Pull that up there. So everyone should be able to see that. So it's got your email address, phone number, website, everything there.
Exactly.
So that way people can reach out if they're interested in learning more about CAP60. I know one of the things I'm always impressed by is the ability to customize and those easy to export reports. I know that those take hours and hours without the technology. So
yes, I know the VOCA report. We had a client who did the VOCA report. They said it took them a full month to do that report, and now it takes them like 2 or 3 minutes. So it can be a huge difference. So price, I can't really talk on price. They don't let me play with money, so I don't know much about the pricing. But if you want to send out an email or a phone call, and we can do a demonstration, and the salesperson will be able to provide pricing information. It's very affordable. We are very competitive. I know that much for sure. But yeah, feel free to do that. So please email us or call us, or you can even go to our website and go to contact us and ask for a demonstration as well. So any one of those methods, you can reach out to us, and we'll be happy to set up a demonstration, show you how the system works, and then, like I said, the salesperson can talk to you about what pricing is and what it might look like. And I believe for anybody who does that, if you do go through that, tell them that you were in the domesticshelters.org webinar. And once you complete a demonstration, we'll also send you a little Starbucks gift card to say thank you. Have a little coffee on us. So
Awesome.
so it goes over the entire state inventory documents. We have lots of document storage and things like that as well. So yeah, we have all of that stuff. So I highly encourage you, please reach out to us, set up a demonstration, and we can tell you pricing and all of that stuff on the demonstration.
Fantastic. Well, Sean, always appreciate you stopping by and sharing more about CAP60. And of course, really appreciate the support of CAP60 to make this webinar possible today. I'll leave that contact information up there, and everyone that's joining now, if you miss it, it'll be in the recording, so you can grab that information once we send that out in the next week. But yeah, thank you to everyone who stuck around to the end, and thank you to Sean for joining us. But if there's nothing else that you want to add, Sean, we'll go ahead and wrap up.
No, I think that's it. I really appreciate you guys staying that extra time to see what we have. I know time is important to you guys, so thank you so much for the time that you guys gave today. And I wish everybody a happy day and a happy weekend.
Same to you. All right. Thank you, Sean. And thanks, everyone. Take care.